Welcome back to my channel What If Legend. This what if is on what if Naruto had rinnegan part 1. The like goal for this video 30 likes. Sooner the like goal is meets sooner I will upload next part for this what if. If you enjoy this what if, don't forget like, comment and subscribe to this channel. Disclaimer, I don't own Naruto nor this what if. Kabuto-san, the short, spiky blonde-haired figure of Uzumaki Naruto gasped in confusion, "What are you doing here? You know who he is?" The tall, bulky figure of Jiraiya asked him with a sideward glance. "Yeah," Naruto replied with a vigorous nod of his head, causing his hair to shake all over the place, making it messier than it had been previously. "He was at the Chunin exams." Before Jiraiya could reply to Naruto, he was barged out of the way as Tsunade, the woman that they had spent the best part of 4 days searching for, went rampaging forward toward the gray-haired young man who stood just meters in front of them, her fist cocked back, a look of pure rage on her face as she closed the distance between them. As quickly as Tsunade's attack had been launched, it came to an end. Naruto's eyes had been barely able to keep up with what was happening. All he knew was that Tsunade had now stopped, her fist mere inches away from Kabuto's face. Blood splattered across the ground as it cascaded around Kabuto's kunai, which lay embedded in Tsunade's forehead. "Blood!" Tsunade shrieked. It was the most terrible shriek that Naruto had ever heard. It was a shriek of pure terror that echoed across the desert-like wasteland they stood in. "My body finally started to move," Kabuto told Tsunade victoriously, a smug expression on his face as he slowly pushed his glasses back up onto the perch of his nose. "Bet you hadn't expected that, huh, Lady Tsunade?" Naruto couldn't tell what was up with Tsunade, but it was like her body had just shut down. Sure, the cut that Kabuto had nailed her with would have hurt, but it shouldn't have caused her to become unresponsive. Taking advantage of her state, Kabuto unleashed a vicious kick to Tsunade's chest, sending her sprawling backwards. "Tsunade-sama!" Shizune screamed as she dove to catch her injured master. Everything was happening so fast, he didn't understand what was happening. Why was Kabuto attacking the future Hokage? Why was he even here? What the hell is going? Naruto shouted as Shizune landed on the ground with a thump beside him, Tsunade's unresponsive body landing on top of her. "Your stupidity continues to astound me," Kabuto told his fellow Jonin, casually whipping Tsunade's blood from his kunai. "It's the reason you can never hope to compare to Sasuke-kun." Anger welled up inside Naruto. Who was Kabuto to tell him he couldn't compare to Sasuke? He had managed to get through in the Chunin exams, or broken bar Kabuto hadn't even managed to make it into preliminaries. Sasuke hadn't managed to even beat his opponent in the third part of the Chunin exam, a broken bar. In fact, he had defeated him instead. "Look at his headband, kid," Jiraiya said to Naruto, snapping him out of his thoughts and making his eyes snap up to Kabuto's Hittite. There, where Naruto expected to see the little leaf symbol that represented all Konoha Shinobi, was the symbol he had seen a few times during the Chunin exams, or broken bar, the symbol of the sound. He's Orochimaru's subordinate. A smile lit up upon Kabuto's face, a look of pride as he proudly proclaimed, "That's right, I'm a spy for Otogakure no Sato wa broken bar." "What?" Naruto stuttered. Was it true? Could Kabuto, the man who had helped his team through the forest of death, really be working with Orochimaru? Had he helped him brand Sasuke with that weird seal? Had he helped him kill the Sandaime? "You know what I have discovered, Naruto-kun?" Kabuto asked Naruto. His voice still the same friendly tone that had drew Konohagakure no Sato's rookie 9 to him whilst they were waiting for Chunin exams to start. "I concluded that you, unlike Sasuke-kun, have no talent as a Shinobi." It hit him hard. He'd been told many times that he would never make it as a Shinobi, but he'd never let it get to him. He'd ignored everything that was said, ignored the taunts of being the dead last. He had graduated despite everything and was now a Shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. His breathing had gotten short and shallow as he struggled to control his anger. Every fiber of his body was telling him to show Kabuto just what type of Shinobi he was. A gentle hand gripped his shoulder lightly. Naruto's head snapped up to see the friendly face of Jiraiya smiling down at him. His weird tattoos crinkled as he smiled and his normally lecherous face transformed into a pleasant smile. "Don't listen to him, kid," the Toad Sannin told Naruto, giving his shoulder another squeeze. "He isn't a proper shinobi, a broken bar. He is in no position to cast judgment on your skills. Even if you do make a scary face, it doesn't change the fact that out here," Kabuto informed Naruto, "you are nothing more than an out-of-place Jonin. You rely on that monster inside you, but next to the Sannin you are nothing. And I won't hesitate to kill you if you try something stupid." It was the final straw for Naruto. He gave a roar of anger and started to charge, only to be yanked back by the strong arm of Jiraiya. "See, even a fool like Jiraiya knows you would die if you tried something." Kabuto smirked. "Actually," the Toad Sannin corrected, "I just don't want Naruto to risk getting his clothes dirty. I hear traitor's blood is hard to get out." "You haven't changed, Jiraiya," Orochimaru hissed from behind Kabuto, his ember eyes shining with malice as he stared at his former teammate. "You are still as weak as always. One man's weakness is another man's strength." Jiraiya countered, a slight nod of his head, his eyes staring at Orochimaru, who bared his teeth and growled, "Shizune, you handle the kid in the glasses." "I'll take Orochimaru." "But Jiraiya-sama," Shizune whispered, barely loud enough for Naruto to hear. "What about a broken bar?" She trailed off. "Tsunade isn't in a fit state to fix her mistake. I'll just have to deal with it." Jiraiya returned with an equally low whisper before turning to Tsunade, who had sank to her knees and was shaking, her blood no longer on her body. "Probably thanks to Shizune. Heal yourself with your jutsu, Tsunade-hime." "What about me?" Naruto argued. If this pervert thought for 1 second he was just going to sit back and watch as they fought, he had another thing coming. "You stay here and guard Tsunade," the white-haired Toad Sannin replied. "What?" Naruto yelled. "Look," Jiraiya explained to Naruto, "they're dangerous ninja. Orochimaru killed the Sandaime and Kabuto could give Kakashi a run for his money. A broken bar, they're just too powerful for you." "But my Kage Bushin," Naruto protested, his hands already performing the seals. "It's useless," Jiraiya told Naruto, slapping the boy's hands, breaking the chain of seals. "With those two as your opponents, you're just wasting chakra. Just a broken bar, just make sure nothing happens to Tsunade." In a blur, Jiraiya demonstrated speed which no man his age should have been capable of. He brought his thumb up to his mouth, bit it so a small trickle of blood rolled down the edge of the digit before slamming his open palm down onto the dusty ground and shouting, "Kuchiyos no Jutsu." His actions had been mirrored almost perfectly by Orochimaru and Kabuto, the combined effort just a fraction of a second behind that of Jiraiya's. 2 loud bangs echoed across the wasteland, 2 pillars of smoke appearing and quickly disappearing and revealing a giant's neck in the place of Kabuto and Orochimaru, who had taken residence on the beast's head, and beside Jiraiya a small toad barely ankle high. The intense look on Jiraiya's lips being replaced with a look of utter disappointment as the little toad looked around curiously. "Your stupidity is still as apparent as ever," Orochimaru mocked. "I guess this means I attack first. I have always known of your lack of talent, a broken bar, but even this is poor by your standards. Perhaps Tsunade has hindered you? Perhaps she was prepared to sacrifice the fool for her loved ones after all." "Damn it," Jiraiya grumbled. "Pathetic." Orochimaru sneered. "Hey!" Naruto yelled, his arm outstretched and pointing to the pale figure of Orochimaru, "Don't talk to Iro Sennin like that." Naruto mimicked Jiraiya's earlier actions, biting his own thumb till it bled before slamming his hand down into the ground. He could feel every set of eyes on him as he attempted to summon Game Ubuntu and teach this bastard a lesson. "Kuchiyos no Jutsu." The same bang and smoke appeared as with Jiraiya, and once the smoke cleared, the same look of disappointment appeared on Naruto's face as had on Jiraiya's as it revealed a chubby, ankle-high toad. Jiraiya eyed the boy with slight disappointment as he failed to summon anything that could hope to challenge that giant snake in front of them. Orochimaru said something to Kabuto, but they were too far away from both Oto Shinobi to hear what it was, not that they needed to because shortly after the giant snake reared back before launching himself at the gathered leaf Shinobi. Jiraiya managed to shove Naruto roughly to the side before leaping away himself, leaving the snake to go hurtling into the ground, causing it to crack and splinter at the impact. "Why are you running, Jiraiya?" Orochimaru called as the snake regained its bearings. "Your opponent is me. Give up on the boy, he'll die eventually anyway. A broken bar, why not let it be at the hands of a Shinobi of my caliber?" Jiraiya turned quickly, his hands flashing through numerous seals at a speed that put the majority of Shinobi to shame before stopping and shout, "Doton, Yaminuma!" Orochimaru's amber eyes went wide. The ground around the snake turned from the hard rocky soil into a deep, marshy swamp in a matter of seconds. The swamp constricted his snake, not allowing it to move and keeping from attacking again. With a single jump, Jiraiya made his way onto the head of the snake, meters away from Orochimaru, who seemed completely undisturbed by the close arrival of his old teammate. Just continuing to stand there as if Jiraiya was nothing but an academy student to him. Beneath the two Sennin and on the ground, Shizune and Kabuto were engaging in battle. No matter how skilled the young woman was at medical jutsu, she just wasn't a battling Shinobi. Even Naruto could see that. She wasn't as proficient at using her medical jutsu as offensive weapons like Kabuto was. Shizune exposed her forearm, a weird contraption attached to it which promptly fired off several Senbon at the Oto medical Shinobi, all of which Kabuto avoided before charging at Shizune. His hand flaring with chakra, the dark-haired apprentice barely managed to jump back in time to avoid contact. As she dove backwards, she inhaled and spat a mass of thick purple fog out of her mouth toward Kabuto. The fog cleared and Kabuto was nowhere to be seen. Shizune looked around for any sign of the man, her eyes lingering a little at the motionless form of Naruto, which still hadn't gotten up after Jiraiya pushed him out of the way of Orochimaru's snake. With a crack, Kabuto announced his return to the battle. Searing pain erupted in Shizune's legs as she felt Kabuto's arm burst through the ground underneath her and grabbed the back of her calves. "My legs!" Shizune gasped as she fell to her knees, her legs giving out underneath her. Off to the side and away from the battles, Naruto stirred, managing to sit up, shaking his head as he turned to face the battle. He could see Jiraiya and Orochimaru fighting on top of the snake, and even without the use of his arms, Orochimaru seemed to be holding his own against Jiraiya and Shizune, a broken bar. Well, Shizune wasn't faring well at all. Kabuto was stood over her as Shizune desperately tried to heal her legs, giving the short black-haired woman the same smile he had given Tsunade before kicking her. He delivered a punch right to the woman's jaw. A sickening crack followed, which made even Naruto wince. Naruto watched with dismay as Kabuto walked towards Tsunade. Tsunade still hadn't moved from her position. She seemed almost catatonic with fear, her shaking still not ceasing. This was the woman he was supposed to protect, a broken bar, the future Hokage of Konoha. He wasn't going to let some worthless traitor touch her. Getting to his feet, ignoring the pain that seared through his body as he did so, he moved at speed he didn't know he could, fully intent of getting between Kabuto and Tsunade and stopping that bastard Kabuto. Naruto stopped in between Kabuto and Tsunade. Kabuto's fist already on its way to connecting with Tsunade. Naruto had barely arrived in time to stop the fist and hadn't had time to intercept the fist, instead taking the punch himself. His head snapped back at the force of it. "Naruto," Kabuto growled, "I told you you'd die if you interfered." Naruto turned his eyes back upon Kabuto. His face contorted with anger, teeth bared in an animalistic manner, his strange whisker-like marks on his cheeks seemed deeper and more pronounced, but it was his eyes that had changed the most. His eyes had gone from bright blue to a cool metallic silver color that covered the entire eye. Concentric circles getting progressively larger marked the silver which covered where the whites of his eyes should have been. "You're a broken bar." Kabuto stuttered. "Your eyes, Naruto delivered a kick to Kabuto's gut which sent him stumbling a few feet backwards that gave the young Jonin enough time to summon a Kage Bushin, momentarily pausing. As his eyes were assaulted with multiple points of view making him blink in surprise before quickly focusing his chakra and letting the clone mold into the spinning sphere of chakra that Jiraiya had been trying to teach him. As Naruto dove as Kabuto, the sphere of chakra, spinning wildly in his hand, Kabuto dodged it, leaving Naruto to flying to a rock. The rock shattering into 1,000 pieces as the ball of chakra hit it. "You can't hit me, Naruto," Kabuto sneered. "You are a failure, Uzumaki." "A nothing, nobody, just a demon, a broken bar." "I'm not a demon," Naruto roared as she got back up from his failed attack. "That seal on your stomach says otherwise," Kabuto told Naruto. "The only thing you'll be remembered for is holding the beast. Nothing more." "Shut up. I don't know what happened to your eyes," Kabuto told Naruto. "Perhaps a side effect of the ki, a broken bar, but it won't save you now. You'll be just another name on that worthless rock Konoha is so fond of." Kabuto charged, his hand gripping a kunai. Naruto managed to create another clone before Kabuto got any closer, a plan formulating in his mind as Kabuto closed in on him with his kunai pointed at his heart. "Run, Naruto!" Tsunade screamed. Naruto's clone looked at the women in shock, the images of Tsunade no longer shaking in fear being sent back to the original Naruto. It was too late, however. Kabuto lunged forward, the kunai resting between his fingers to make sure it would pierce his heart, just as Naruto had hoped. Naruto at the last second moved his hand in front of his heart, the kunai piercing straight through the palm of his hand then closed around Kabuto's fist, tightly gripping it despite his own injury. "Until I become Hokage," Naruto growled between ragged breaths, "I refuse to die." Naruto stretched his free hand out and began to gather what was left of his chakra, and the clone began to mold the chakra. The ball of chakra forming again, Naruto smiled in triumph as he saw Kabuto's eyes widen as he realized what was about to happen. Swinging his free arm, the ball of chakra hit Kabuto in the chest, sending him spinning through the air before landing in the floor with a crack. "Those eyes are broken bar," Orochimaru gasped in surprise as he watched Naruto send Kabuto flying through the air. He and Jiraiya had come to a standstill, much to his dismay. His old teammate's strength had returned much sooner than he would have liked. "It can't be broken bar." Orochimaru turned his eyes once more to Jiraiya, who he saw was watching wide-eyed at the scene below them. "You know those eyes?" Orochimaru asked breathlessly, his head cocked to the side as he tried to figure out how Jiraiya knew about a night technique that he had never seen. Jiraiya turned his attention back to Orochimaru, looking at him shock in those dark brown eyes that no longer held the ties of friendship that they once had. "Every shinobi worth his salt knows those eyes," Jiraiya told Orochimaru with a hint of smugness. "It's thanks to those eyes you're able to use ninjutsu?" Could it be? Surely it wasn't possible. Those eyes, the eyes Jiraiya had alluded to, were nothing but a legend. A legend created by the shinobi, a myth. He had never once dreamt that they were real. But they were in front of him, a broken bar. He could see them with his very own eyes. What powers did hold? It was rumored they allowed the legendary Sage of Six Paths to master all of the elements, to master things no other man had even dreamed of. To think that those eyes had awakened in that child, the child already a broken bar, advantages or disadvantages depending on your view, over other shinobi, but with these eyes he could become a force of nature. A god among shinobi, more powerful than anybody. He could not have that. He could not have somebody with the potential to threaten everything he had worked so hard for. No, a broken bar. He would not waste those years of research, those years of failed attempts and years of trying to master every jutsu only to be undone by some brat who bears the sage's eyes. He was left with only one option. Nobody knew the true power of the rinnegan. Nobody still alive had ever seen the rinnegan in action, but if its legend was true, even a fraction true, a broken bar, then he had no choice. He had to kill the brat before he had started to master the power of those eyes. Yes, the beast would not leave this wasteland. With that final thought, Orochimaru dived of the still trapped body of his summoned snake suddenly, plummeting towards the ground at breakneck speed. His ember eyes fixed on the body of Kiba container. He was so close. Perhaps he had underestimated the boy. Forget the Sharingan, if he could get his hands on the rinnegan he'd be unstoppable. A true shinobi force. To think such eyes were wasted in possession of such an untalented breath. Please, Tsunade sobbed as she placed her hands on Naruto's chest, her chakra flaring suddenly as she tried to heal the young boy. He had fought so bravely for her, ignoring the obvious stress that his body was feeling to protect her. He'd beaten a shinobi who, despite what Naruto had said earlier, was closer to Jonin standard than his rank would suggest. He'd risked his life repeatedly for her. She wouldn't let him die. Ha, Naruto managed to say as he coughed, blood trickling down out of the corner as his lips quirked into a soft smile. Tsunade felt herself getting lost in his almost hypnotic eyes. She ideally reminded herself to talk to Jiraiya about this latest development before she felt a hand brush against her breast. Looking down, she saw Naruto's blood-soaked hand clutching at her necklace. I guess Hiroshinen was right, he coughed violently again. You really are terrible. Better. With that, Naruto gave the necklace a yank. The chain that held it around her neck gave way and fell onto his chest. You're going to make a wonderful Hokage, Naruto. Tsunade said quietly as Naruto closed his eyes, slipping once again into unconsciousness. Touching how a boy you didn't even know would nearly kill himself and to protect you, the unmistakable voice of Orochimaru hissed, touching but pathetic. I don't know what you want, Orochimaru, Tsunade growled, standing for the first time since attempting to attack Kabuto, but I want to heal your arms. You're wasting your time here. Oh, I'm not after my arms being healed anymore, Tsunade. Orochimaru informed her with a twisted smile. There is one other way to get my arms healed, and no, I'm here for something much more important. Tsunade stood her ground protectively over Naruto. Oh really, and what would that be? His eyes. Orochimaru hissed, his own ember eyes becoming merciless as he lunged at her, his mouth open in the most unnatural way, a snake appearing where his tongue should be, hissing and twisting violently before opening its jaw and shooting a sword out of its mouth. He was aiming to kill her. Without her there, he would have free reign on Naruto. A broken bar, she'd protect him like he had protected her. She'd die for him. Orochimaru gained closer and closer. And with every step he took, she braced herself for what she knew would likely kill her. Orochimaru didn't aim to injure, he aimed to kill. This was no different. Rasengan. Out of the ground barely a meter in front of her, Jiraiya shot out the Rasengan, fully formed and buried into the stomach of Orochimaru, whose eyes were wide as both he and Jiraiya flew into the air. It appeared in his greed Orochimaru had become distracted and not paid enough attention to Jiraiya's whereabouts. Jiraiya landed first and upon landing fell back beside her, flashing a grin at her as he had done so many times in the past. It was comforting in an odd sort of way. She'd spent most of her childhood trying to beat that stupid grin off of Jiraiya's face, but now it was comforting to see such a familiar face, a broken bar which was trying to kill her or Naruto. Seconds after Jiraiya had landed, Orochimaru followed, landing feet away from them, his clothes ripped and exposing the torn flesh of his stomach, which was bleeding heavily as a result of the Rasengan. The wound didn't seem to bother Orochimaru, who continued to stare at both of them. Even I cannot beat you both, Orochimaru admitted begrudgingly. I am not stupid enough to try to, till we meet again, old friends. The ground seemed to swallow Orochimaru, whose figure seemed to slowly sink deeper and deeper into the ground until nothing remained, and it was like Orochimaru had never been there. A soft bang caught the remaining Sunin's attention. Smoke had appeared where the body of Kabuto had laid since Naruto had managed to take him out of the equation. Tsunade, a broken bar, Jiraiya said, trying to get her attention. Not now, Jiraiya, the women snapped. We have to get Naruto to a place he can rest. He's exhausted and I didn't finish treating him earlier. Shizune needs treatment as well. Okay, Jiraiya nodded in agreement. Back to the village you were staying in? It's the closest and the kid should be fine within a few hours. It'll have to do, Tsunade agreed. You get the Gaki, I'll heal Shizune. Jiraiya nodded and moved towards the unconscious form of Naruto, turning his head over his shoulder saying, Tsunade, we have much to discuss when we get the chance. See a broken bar. It's more important than you could imagine. His injuries were all healed. There had been nothing serious about the young boy's injuries, all that had remained of the injuries were a few additional scars to the boy's already impressive collection. Of course that didn't mean that his injuries hadn't worried Tsunade half to death. When facing somebody of Orochimaru's caliber and somebody with the anatomy knowledge that Kabuto had demonstrated, injuries were not always visible. Tsunade had checked him over numerous times just to make sure that she hadn't missed anything. The only explanation to why he was still sleeping was that he was exhausted. Perhaps those two Rangans had taken more out of the boy than either she or Jiraiya had anticipated. Thankfully Shizune's injury had been one that she had been able to heal quickly, and her long-time traveling companion and friend had only been too happy to help her check over. Naruto, another pair of eyes, had never hurt anybody. Tsunade had to admit she was impressed with her apprentice. She'd never really seen Shizune in a combat situation, and before last night had never really given it much thought. Their travels had never resulted in any need for either herself or Shizune to demonstrate their skills. More often than not people just assume they were just civilians traveling through. Perhaps when she officially assumed the role of Hokage she could implement more emphasis on medical jutsu. If anything had been proved from last night it was how useful medical was. For both offensive jutsu and looking after your teammates, perhaps now she could implement the one medical specialist per team idea that she had had all of those years ago. Maybe becoming Hokage did have its advantages. A soft knock at the door broke her away from the various ideas she had swimming around her head. There was only one person who that could be, what with Shizune currently in town stocking up on her supplies. Without waiting for her to answer, the door slowly creaked open. Tsunade saw the familiar white hair before she saw his face. Jiraiya looked the same as he always did. His long white hair tied loosely behind his head and falling down his back, the familiar dark green jumpsuit with the sleeveless red jacket draped over. She found herself a little envious that Jiraiya had aged so well, not that she would ever tell Jiraiya that, whilst she was forced to hide behind her jutsu. Is everything okay? He asked her, looking at her with a worried expression. Everything's fine, Tsunade replied calmly. He's just exhausted. Those Rangans must have really taken it out of him. Don't you think he's a little young for a technique of that? A broken bar. Rank? I didn't think he could do it, Jiraiya replied as he took a seat on the windowsill. I only told him about it to stop him bugging me. The kid is really persistent. Now you know how me and my grandfather felt, Tsunade informed her longtime friend and longtime pain in the ass. Hey! Jiraiya exclaimed, a look of outrage across his face. I was never as bad as the Gaki. He could work in the interrogation division. His level of irritation would have people spilling their guts faster than a Jinin after too much sake. You don't think that, Tsunade told Jiraiya with a raised eyebrow, almost challenging him to disagree with her. I saw the way you were when he wanted to fight Kabuto. A broken bar. Well, I can't deny the kid has certain charms, Jiraiya acknowledged. And what type of godfather would I be if I let him run off into battle against people who'd kill him in a heartbeat? Do I need to point he did that anyway? Tsunade asked with a raised eyebrow. Hey, I was occupied. I'm only one man, you know. Jiraiya told her before winking lecherously at her and putting on what she could only assume he thought was a charming smile, wiggling his eyebrows perversely and saying, and what a man. You're an idiot, Tsunade snorted. Do these lines ever actually work? Yup, Jiraiya replied smugly, like a charm. Then I am losing faith in my gender. Tsunade replied sadly before looking back up at Jiraiya and asking, why are you here? I've known you too long to think you've just come by to tell me about your way with women. I'm just checking my godson is doing okay, Jiraiya replied, trying to and failing to look convincing. Bull, Tsunade growled. There's something you want to tell me and I know there is. So just tell me. It's a broken bar complicated. Jiraiya sighed, and seeing her looking expectantly at him, he relented and continued, do you remember the war? Tsunade rolled her eyes. Of course I remember the war. Which one specifically? We seem to have spent most of our younger years in one war or another. The Second Great Shinobi Wars. Jiraiya replied deadpanned. How could she forget that war? That war that had cost her so much, the lives of her lover Dan, her brother Nawaki, along with countless friends, and all that was achieved was the buffer land, now known as the River Country, between Konoha and Sinnoh being created. It seemed like such a small price to pay for hundreds of lives. Team Senju had been, in many people's opinions, not just her own, the turning point of the war. Their stalemate with Sansei Ring no Hands A Ring had caused Omigakure no Sato to pull out of their treaty with Tsunagakure no Sato, leaving the Sent considerably weaker and no match for Konoha forces. Of course, whether or not Hanzo decided to step away from the war as a mark of respect to them and their abilities, or because the three Sennin had effectively crushed his village to dust in their pursuit of him, Tsunade didn't know. Though she personally suspected the latter. What about them? Do you remember after our battle with Hanzo? Jiraiya asked. As we made our way back towards Konoha, we stumbled across those three little orphans. Yeah, Tsunade nodded, remembering the three he was talking about. Yeah, I remember them. You stayed behind with them, if I recall? She knew that she was right. She may be getting on in years, but she wasn't quite that old yet. Her memory was as sharp as it had always been. She had just spent many years in the company of Jiraiya to know that if he didn't want to speak about something, it was incredibly difficult to get him to do so. She had long since discovered it was best to gently guide the old fool along, so he revealed what he wanted in little chunks. Sure, it was like getting blood out of a stone, but it was the only way to get personal information from Jiraiya. A broken bar, and when it was obviously important, it was vital she knew it. I did, Jiraiya replied with a nod, nearly 3 years in a makeshift hut in the ruins of Omigakure. I don't understand? Tsunade asked. Why was he telling her this now? It had been nearly 30 years since they had stumbled across those three little orphans. What significance could they possibly hold now? I looked after them, trained them until they were good level Shinobi for nearly 3 years after you left. Jiraiya informed her, looking out the window lost in thought. It was rare to see another side to Jiraiya other than his loud and brash personality. It was rather unnerving, if truth be told. I never did get why you stayed behind so long, Tsunade told him. They were just orphans. There were hundreds of orphans and we'd seen a good portion of the Ama broken bar. Why did those kids make you stay behind? Do you remember the kid who came asking for food? Tsunade nodded, remembering the solemn face of a young boy, his spiky hair caked in mud and dirt, looking like he'd just stepped out of the rubble. And Jiraiya continued, his name was Yahiko. Brave little kid he was. Always looking out for the other two, he was the leader. He begged me to teach him jutsu so he could protect his friends. I'd been reluctant, you know me, I was never much of a teacher. Tsunade knew that wasn't strictly true. Nobody who had trained the Yondaime Hokage could claim to be a bad teacher. The things the Yondaime had done were truly spectacular, and many of it was due to Jiraiya and his teachings. Well, I didn't really have much choice in the end, Jiraiya told her. I woke up one day to Conan, and you must remember the little blue-haired girl, screaming hysterically. I thought we were under attack, that the war had restarted and Omigakure was under invasion. It wasn't though, was it? Tsunade asked, knowing full well it wasn't. Omigakure hadn't been involved in another full-scale war until the Third Great Shinobi War. No, Jiraiya told her, it was Yahiko. He'd been attacked by a Shinobi from Iwagakure no Sato. When I arrived I found little Nagato sat beside the body and unconscious Yahiko, a broken bar he'd killed a Chunin with no training at all. Nagato? Tsunade repeated, getting images of a small timid little boy with a mop of bright orange hair that completely covered his eyes. He had those eyes, Tsunade. Jiraiya told her, a hint of confusion in his voice. He possessed the rinnegan. What? Tsunade gasped, how was this possible? That little boy in the ruins of Amergakure had the legendary technique that had belonged to the Sage of Sixth Paths, the man responsible for creating ninjutsu? No wonder Jiraiya stayed with them so long. Do you know what the rinnegan looks like, Tsunade-hime? Jiraiya asked curiously. She didn't. She had heard stories of the legendary eye techniques, but she had just assumed it was a myth. She knew of many Kekkai Genkai that could be found in their world, hell two of which resided in her own home village. But in all her travels to many villages of the Shinobi world, many of which some Shinobi had never even heard of, she had never seen or even heard rumors of anybody possessing the rinnegan. No, Tsunade admitted. No, I don't. You do, Jiraiya informed her, for the first time in 10 minutes, taking his eyes away from the window and focused on her. You saw it last night. With that, Jiraiya cast a look at the unconscious form of Naruto. Tsunade followed his line of sight and quickly snapped her vision back up to Jiraiya. He couldn't be saying what she thought. He was a broken bar, could he? The changes in Naruto's eyes, that cold metallic silver with those odd concentric rings. Was that the rinnegan? Impossibly broken bar, Tsunade breathed, looking at Jiraiya like he had gone mad for even suggesting such a thing. It's true. You don't forget the sight of the rinnegan once you lay eyes on it. Jiraiya told her. But a broken bar, but how? Tsunade questioned, still struggling to believe that the change in Naruto's eyes was that of the rinnegan. Perhaps it's not the rinnegan? Maybe it's just a product of the Kyuubi. We've seen him with the whisker marks. Maybe this is just another trait. No, Jiraiya denied with a shake of his head, it's the rinnegan. It's almost identical to Nagato's. It can't be a product of the Kyuubi. Almost, Tsunade asked with a frown. What do you mean almost? Nagato's was a broken bar. It was a dull purple, almost gray. Jiraiya told Tsunade, but the pattern, those circles from his pupil. It's unmistakable. But how? Tsunade asked, still skeptical about this whole situation. Konoha never had the rinnegan Kekkai Genkai. We'd have known if we had. There were and still are entire clans for the Sharingan and Byakugan, but not so much as a whisper about the rinnegan. Hell, I don't think many people in Konoha even know of the third eye technique. I don't know, Jiraiya admitted. I have theories. Thoughts that have swam around my head since last night, but nothing concrete. I doubt we'll ever know for sure how this has happened. Let's hear them then, Tsunade demanded. Does it matter, Tsunade? Jiraiya sighed, running a hand through his hair tiredly. Seeing the women glaring at him, he continued with a huff. When Nagato first awakened his rinnegan, he had no idea what it was. A broken bar, he had no idea. I had to explain it, with my limited knowledge of such a Kekkai Genkai, to him. Your point? Tsunade asked, getting slightly annoyed at how little information Jiraiya was actually revealing. That unlike the other eye techniques, Nagato wasn't taught about it, didn't expect it, and didn't know anything about it. Jiraiya snapped. Does that sound like a clan to you? No, Tsunade admitted, slightly taken back about how agitated Jiraiya was becoming. Most clans teach about their Kekkai Genkai even before they have awoken their bloodlines. Exactly. Jiraiya replied enthusiastically. It was odd back then that Nagato didn't know of his bloodline, and now a broken bar. Well, a broken bar, maybe it makes sense. Nagato said his parents had been killed by foreign Shinobi, but even so you don't get to 13 and not know of your bloodline. A broken bar unless Nagato's family themselves didn't know. Is that even possible? Tsunade asked immediately. Think about it. Is there a massive clan for the rinnegan like there is for the Sharingan and the Byakugan? No, you never hear anything about those eyes, which means it's incredibly rare. Not the type of technique that awakens in every clan member. How do you know that? Didn't you say Nagato's family was wiped out in the war? Tsunade asked. No, Jiraiya corrected, I said his parents were killed at Broken Bar. But surely if the boy had had family he wouldn't have been sleeping rough and begging for food, Tsunade pointed out. If he had family wouldn't we have heard about more rinnegans? That's just it, Tsunade, Jiraiya said. Have you ever heard of somebody possessing the rinnegan? I hadn't before teaching Nagato and haven't since. So what are you saying? That Naruto and Nagato are related? Tsunade asked, her eyebrows rising at the implication. They must be, Jiraiya nodded in conclusion. The rinnegan is a bloodline. It flows through families, not just random shinobi. But like you said, the rinnegan isn't exactly common on a Broken Bar. How did it get from a Murgakure where there may or may not have been a clan to Konoha? Tsunade asked Jiraiya, getting increasingly frustrated with the fact that every time they came close to an answer it opened yet another door. Any number of ways, Jiraiya exclaimed. You remember the amount of refugees that flooded to Konoha during and after the war. It's possible that one of those refugees possessed the dormant bloodline, perhaps without ever realizing. But that means either Minato or Kushina Broken Bar, Tsunade told Jiraiya, who nodded slowly. How could the rinnegan not be activated by either one of them? Both of them were exceptional shinobis. I have an idea about that too. A Broken Bar, Jiraiya revealed. The Sharingan is awakened when it is most needed. The Byakugan is the rare example of being active from birth. The Broken Bar in both cases. That I saw the rinnegan active, it was in times of immense distress. Perhaps whichever refugee arrived with it simply hadn't suffered that type of distress for it to activate. Tsunade opened her mouth to reply but was cut off by a sudden groan from the bed that sat just a few meters away from where both she and Jiraiya were stood. Naruto's eyes flickered for several moments before slowly opening, then blinking at the sudden intrusion of the light, his eyes still that odd metallic silver that seemed so out of place. Tsunade found herself missing those bright blue eyes that had defiantly told her he'd mastered the Rasengan. Tsunade watched as his eyes flicked to various parts of the room, a frown appeared on his forehead in apparent confusion, and the soft triple of the sheets that covered him from the shoulders down indicated that he was stretching his body. The wince on his face told her that she was right. A Broken Bar, his body was hurting today. His eyes settling on both herself and Jiraiya, a momentary look of confusion filtered across his face and he cocked to the side and blinked like an owl. Tsunade managed to sneak a glance at Jiraiya, who had not taken his eyes off the boy. What's the matter, Naruto? Jiraiya asked, this time meeting her eyes in a quick glance of concern. What's wrong with my eyes? Naruto asked, looking worried. A Broken Bar, is that your chakra? There was a pause. Neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade said anything. On her part it was mainly because she didn't know what to say. She was so out of her depth. What's going on? Naruto sounded utterly confused. I never used to be able to see chakra. Is it the Broken Bar? Tsunade saw him glance at her suddenly and Jiraiya giving him a nod. It was odd to see Jiraiya acting almost a Broken Bar fatherly and giving somebody permission to speak. Goodbye. Tsunade couldn't help but notice him almost wince as he mentioned the demon fox. He'd said the name of the demon in a low quiet voice, understandably, due to the fact that Sarutobi had made it illegal to mention the Kyuubi no Yoka being sealed within Naruto. A Broken Bar, at least that was what she'd been told. No, Naruto, it isn't the Kyuubi. Jiraiya answered quietly as he moved away from the windowsill that he had been perched for the last hour or so and down onto the side of the bed that Naruto was staying in. Then what is it? Naruto asked, sitting up against the battered headboard, exposing his torso and the tip of his seal showing. Jiraiya glanced at Tsunade, who could offer him nothing more than a shrug. Jiraiya looked down at Naruto's curious eyes and opened his mouth several times before closing it again, apparently struggling to find a way to start. Naruto's ringed eyes looked at the Sennin expectantly. You know of Da Ring Jutsu, right kid? Jiraiya asked. Yup. Naruto proclaimed proudly, like the Sharingan and Byakugan, right? Exactly, Jiraiya nodded in agreement. Now what many shinobi don't realize is that there is a third DA ring jutsu. It's incredibly rare and said to be very powerful. A broken bar. It's said that the creator of ninjutsu possessed it. It's called the rinnegan. It can't be that awesome, Naruto replied defiantly, crossing his arms across his chest and looking at Jiraiya, otherwise Ruka-sensei would have mentioned it at the academy. Perhaps that's because for many shinobi the rinnegan is nothing but a myth, Jiraiya told Naruto. Some believe that it died out a long time ago on a broken bar, others believe it just never existed, a fabrication of ninja folklore. But it's not, right? Naruto guessed. No, it's very real. Jiraiya answered, and it awakened in you during your fight with Kabuto. Naruto looked at Jiraiya for a few moments. Tsunade could see his eyes boring into the man. Like he didn't quite believe what Jiraiya had told him, not that she could really blame him. Jiraiya had just told him how rare this DA ring jutsu was, only to reveal moments later that he now possessed it. If she were in Naruto's shoes, she didn't think she'd believe Jiraiya either. Prove it. Naruto challenged. Tsunade couldn't help but smile. His only experience with DA ring jutsu was with the Sharingan and Byakugan, both of which could be activated and deactivated. Naruto no doubt expected to gaze upon his own familiar blue eyes as Jiraiya handed him a small mirror, normally used by civilian women to apply their makeup, and watched as Naruto examined his eyes closely. It seemed that the rinnegan was different from the other dojutsu. Instead of being activated whenever the user needed it, seemed to be active permanently. He blinked noticeably a few times, like he thought the ripple-like effects were just an effect of him sleeping so long. He followed this up by rubbing one eye rather vigorously, and when he saw that his eyes still hadn't changed, he peered closer to the mirror, getting a good look at them before letting the small mirror drop onto the bed and peering back at Jiraiya. I don't understand? Naruto asked, looking completely confused. Jiraiya gave him a sad, apologetic smile before saying, I'm sorry Naruto, but we're not completely sure what happened ourselves. I don't understand, Naruto repeated, his face scrunched up in confusion whilst glaring a spot between where his feet rested, just to our bloodline as a broken bar that'd mean my parents would have had it. His voice was rapidly brightening with hope, and Tsunade could see where this conversation was heading and felt bad at the disappointment that she knew he would feel when he found nobody in Konoha to have or to ever have had the rinnegan. I could check the archives. Their names must be there if the rinnegan's as powerful as you say, Erosinin. All the Sharingan users are there. The familiarity that Naruto spoke of the archives with made Tsunade wince a little bit. It didn't take much to realize why a little orphan boy would go looking through the Konoha archives. I'm sorry Naruto, Jiraiya told the boy softly, but there has never been a rinnegan user in Konoha. The only dojutsu that Konoha possess are the Sharingan and Byakugan. Naruto visibly deflated, his head dropping in disappointment. It was hard to watch, and whilst Tsunade had never and would never know the feeling of growing up an orphan and could only imagine what it was like for Naruto to build the hope of being able to track down his parents with this new Kekkai Genkai. This only added to the sudden pang of guilt that appeared in the pit of her stomach. She could tell him who his parents were, broken bar, but she had promised she wouldn't. Not until he was ready to handle such information, and she had to begrudgingly admit he wasn't anywhere ready to handle the information he was the Yondame's son. Well, maybe you're wrong, Naruto huffed, turning away from Jiraiya. I'm gonna check the archives anyway. You probably missed them because you were busy perving on some poor women. And anyway, there has to be someone else with the rinnegan, or else I wouldn't have it. Naruto was so busy sulking that he completely missed the sidewards glance that Tsunade received from Jiraiya. One thought running through both of the Sennin's mind. Nagato. Thank you for watching.